Well, welcome to the Young Man's Guide to Life podcast, where we call out misconceptions about adulthood. We learn from one another's mistakes, and ultimately what we're trying to do is empower you, young adults, to take risks so that you can live a better life for yourself. My name is Andrew, and I'm the host of Young Man's Guide to Life podcast. Today, I am joined by two guests. One of them is my co-host, actually, Erik Jensen. He's
Hello.
here. He's back. We missed you last week.
I was there.
You were around. He was in the background, in the dark, in the shadows. And today I have a new guest I want to introduce you to, a dear friend. His name is Matthew Emanuel. What's up, Matt?
Hey, man. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's awesome to have you. I can't wait for our conversation today. Before I tell you about the conversation we're going to have today, I want you to learn a little bit about Matt and learn a little bit about our relationship. So why don't you tell them how we met?
Yeah, sure. What was that? I guess back in 2013.
2013.
One of my really good buddies, Jason, we worked together. He came to me and was like, hey, would you be interested in going to Haiti? Obviously, that came out of left field, so I was thinking, oh, what are you talking about, like a vacation or something? And so then he starts explaining to me this concept, like, oh, yeah, I've got this good buddy, and he's trying to put together this missions trip, want to go do some charity work over in Haiti, and they're looking to expand outside of their regular circle. And it was really cool. I didn't know what to expect, but then obviously I met you, and the months of prep leading up to it, and then our experiences getting there, even
crazy.
Really,
we won't tell them, but they're great stories. Yeah, that was cool. It was a missions trip, but it was a mixture of there's like 10 Christian kids and 10 kids who didn't come from that church, right? So it was people from Renewed Church, Grace Community Church at the time, but then it was like, no, like we should do this together just as young people. But it was really 20 young people. Like I was the dad, and I was like 23 years old, right?
That's terrifying. I've heard about this story recently, and that was the most terrifying part, was that you were in charge of this whole thing.
29-year-old me would be terrified to be in charge of it. 23-year-old me, right? So that was crazy, but it was cool. And we had adventures getting there, but eventually we got there. It was an awesome trip. We did some good work. We helped build a facility there, a missions facility there that still stands today and is still actively used today. And a lot of friendships and relationships came out of it, and experiences came out of it, which you're going to hear is kind of a part of Matt's story. And so we'll give him a chance to tell us a little bit about that in just a bit. But why don't you tell us just about your background? You are from around here. You went to school around here. What did you study, and what did you do for work?
Yeah, I mean, I've mostly been in Mississauga my whole life growing up, just around here, like Mavis in the 401. Went to St. Marcellinus. I even went to University of Toronto, Mississauga. And when I was there, I studied political science and history. Wanted to become prime minister and change the world.
You still can.
We'll see how that goes.
I'd vote for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'd have to earn that vote. But
I'm holding out.
Yeah,
I need to see.
You should.
Vote. I need to see a little more.
Get that citizenship going. But I was kind of that person that sort of always envisioned myself at a certain level and was on a path. And but even when I was in uni, I did start to think that was the talk and the actions matching up? And I a lot of times was letting other people make decisions for me. And so before I even graduated, basically through some family connections, I scored an interview at RBC, the Royal Bank. And everyone's telling me this is fantastic, what a great opportunity. And I killed the interview, of course. And it seemed like a really great thing. And then after the initial luster wore off, I just found myself every day, my commute worked out to about 3 hours round trip. In the wintertime, can you imagine, right?
Gosh.
It's dark when you wake up.
Driving?
Train. I'd drive to the train, everything. And then you go to the path in Toronto, so it's dark going in.
Right.
You go there. When you come out of work, it's dark in the winter, and my office was just gray. And I remember it was kind of like gray days and gray people, because everybody, too, you could feel the energy was so low. And I just was so upset. And it was one of my uncles that kind of said to me, he's like, you just don't seem happy at all. And, of course, you kind of what do you mean, right? And I just started to think, I need to make a change in my life. And I thought about moments that had made me happy, and it was often when I felt like I was doing something, and thought back to Haiti, for example, right? I'm a confident person, but maybe I haven't always been an extrovert person. And then those kinds of opportunities. And then my cousin coincidentally was feeling the same way. And we just got to talking and then got a little radical. It was a bit of a trend at the time to go to Australia.
Well, let me ask. No, that's good. We're right there. We're at the verge of it. Yeah. So today's podcast, I haven't told everybody, today's podcast is ultimately about traveling, and it's asking the question like, I want to travel. You know, every young adult's like, I just want to travel. What do you want to do? I just want to travel. Yeah. What do you want to do? I just want to travel. I want to do travel photography. I want to blog, travel blog. And you're like, no, you're never going to do it. Like
Instagram.
Oh, never heard that before, right? Never heard that before. And you run into people all the time who will say the same thing to you, and like they said that 7 years ago, and they're still saying that today, but they're still working at RBC. So today's conversation is about like, I want to travel, but. And what I want you to hear from Matt today, and we're going to ask him about his experience, he's going to tell you in a little bit, is how to get over that but. Like what is that but? What's that wall there? And how do we get past that? And is it worth it? And should we pursue it? Sometimes we think, I watch Instagram and that's what I want to do, but then so many people never get there, and there's reasons why. And so that's what we're going to jump into today. So continuing your story, you had a good paying job, presumably. You're working at RBC, right?
Yeah.
Good paying job. You didn't even finish your school yet before you got the job, so you were like upper echelon, because a lot of people finish school and they still don't have a job, right? So you're like making it, and then
I had to take a personal day from work to go to my grad ceremony.
That's awesome.
So,
that's great, though.
Yeah, that would be my first thing, is just graduate first. Maybe take a week or two vacation. Actually, I snuck in there laser eye surgery because it was my grad gift to myself.
Oh, nice.
And so I actually, my optometrist was like, "You're crazy. Why would you do this?" I basically had 1 week to heal, then had to do my exams, and then went to full-time work.
Goodness.
But yeah, like I was in such a rush to get somewhere, and I never actually really stopped to think about like, what did I want? Where did I want to be? And then, like coincidentally, like I said, my cousin was in a similar place, and Australia was a bit of a trendy thing at the time, but still new. And we just started looking in that way. You know, you just kind of reach a point where you're like, so many people complain about their lives, is what I started to realize. But no one actually does anything about it, right? Yes. Well, so many people, I should say.
Yep.
And I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be 20, 30 years down the road. And I could see that at the bank. I could see my whole life in front of me, and it terrified me.
Yeah. I had a quick question, actually. So, do you think that you moving from those stepping stones so quickly kind of fueled that fire to like see something different? So like, you know, the normal narrative, like we were talking, is that, you know, you finish university, college, or whatever, and you usually do some nothing job for a while, right? You know, like you're usually working at like Shoppers Drug Mart or whatever. And do you think that you going straight into sort of the corporate world or the real world kind of lifted that veil so dramatically that you were like,
franchise it quick kind of thing?
I don't want that.
I think that in a lot of ways that's part of it. You know, like, well, Andrew knows, right? Like I've told him some parts of this story before. Like at that point in my life, I kind of had a steady girlfriend. I had a nice new car that I was paying payments on, feeling like a real adult. I had this good job. I mean, heck, I was already paying into a retirement plan.
I mean, that's real adult. I'm not even doing that yet. You're way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, exactly, right? And
you shouldn't broadcast that.
I hope maybe talk to a financial advisor. You've got a kid.
I know a guy who used to work at RBC.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, I think to fast forward a second, you know, when I finally made that jump, you know, once you commit, right, like, for example, like with the visas, right? So many people talk about you need to go to this agency and it takes like 3-4 months and all this money. And maybe my financial aptitude, I thought it has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And it's actually, well, at least it was at the time. I don't know if it still is. So easy.
Yeah.
You literally go to the government's website. I think it was like $450.
Yep.
I had my visa in 12 hours.
Yeah.
And here I am, you know, maybe it's a little mean, but laughing at some of my friends thinking, you spent 3-4 months and thousands of dollars and I figured it out.
Well, that's really important because I think a lot of young adults who want to to travel, they think, well, the only people who are able to do it, they have to jump through all these loopholes and get there. It's really difficult to do. Like they think, oh, I know I can fly there, but it's 6 months and I can't work there and yada, yada, yada. And the reality is that's not the case, actually. The world is I don't know what it'll be like post-COVID, but pre-COVID, it was a lot more open than I think people realize. As it was so open when you applied that you literally could go to the government website. It wasn't a long process. I remember applying for myself, right?
Yeah.
It was a little bit, don't be lazy, fill out the paperwork and do it right the first time. And you're literally in 12 hours, you got a rubber stamp that says you can fly to Australia and not just fly there, you could work there. That's what it was, right? It was a working holiday visa, was it?
Yeah, no. So for Australia, because I've had a couple visas now, and the Australia one was a working holiday visa. There are certain restrictions on it, but I believe that you can get up till you're like 35. And like you said, it's a 1-year visa, 6 months of which you can work for one employer, and you can also go work in certain in-need sectors and get a 2-year visa. But I wasn't personally interested in that. I just kind of wanted the experience. And looking back now, I always find it funny is because a lot of people were saying they were looking for something. And maybe I was still a little bit in denial, and I'd say, oh, I'm not lost. I just wanted to take a break, right? And one of the most real moments for me was like 5-6 days into it. First, we stayed with an Airbnb because we were thinking it's a bit more comfortable. I mean, heck, Australia, we chose it because we wanted to be comfortable. Right? After Haiti, I was kind of like feeling emboldened. Like, if I could go to Haiti and hack it there for a little bit, I could go to Australia. And I'm going with my cousin and everything. Right. And I didn't realize how terrifying it was until we left the Airbnb and we went to a legit hostel. And we were still kind of scared of the 18-bedroom common area. So we had the two-bedroom thing, and my cousin left to get something. And I just remember literally sitting there and crying into my hands thinking, I made the biggest mistake of my life.
Yes.
And
I remember that feeling in Australia too, because I went to Australia for a year of school, which I don't regret. But if I was to do it again, I would do what you did, where it was actually I go to work and then I can see more of the world. Because I basically went there. Farthest out I went was 2 hours, right? I couldn't afford. I saw school. I saw Sydney, great, but really, not that much culture, and it's really Toronto, but on the other side of the world. Wow. But I remember getting off the flight, walking with my baggage, thinking, I guess I gotta find a cab. Like I didn't have anyone there.
There's no dad or mom to do it, right?
But the thing with Australia that's so interesting is like it's a different day. Like you're there on a different day than where everyone else is, right? Like I'm on Saturday and they're on Friday still, and I'm not a train ride home. I'm not a short flight home. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I'm the other side of the world. Is that what you're processing where you're like, wait a sec.
So many things.
Where are we? And there's no safety net. There's no backup. Well, I'm just here.
For sure. Especially like, my cousin and I are like brothers, and through the whole experience, I can say that, we both had a lot of growing up to do, and we didn't realize it until we were forced on our own like that. And, for 4 months, we were in a camper van. So can you imagine laying, right beside a person for 4 months? You smell everything, you hear everything, whatever. And, it really does make you have to go through a lot of, self-inventory. I remember calling my dad at one point crying because of emotions. And I'd never even really cried before in my life. So there was a lot of catching up to do, I guess. But I just said to him, I'm so sorry. My dad and I love him to death, but we've clashed many times. And I said, I'm sorry. So much I didn't understand what you were struggling with or going through, and you think being a man is so easy. And that experience grew me the heck up. And sorry.
No, you're good. I want to get there. I want to get to the things you learned about it, because I think that's really important. But before that, because people are thinking, oh, this guy went to Australia. No big deal. No. You started in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Then tell us, because
I thought I had traveled a lot. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, I might have some things to say. And then go ahead.
So you started in Australia. Then what did you do? Where did you go? And what were the steps? You don't have to give all of it, but give us a general, so people understand, oh, no, Australia was the beginning place.
Yeah. So I never imagined myself being the person that I am now. And I look back at who I was, and obviously I'm not completely different, but there's so many different things. And part of that was from the traveling, right? Like, if you want to be practical, obviously this isn't a place to go step by step, but you should do a little research beforehand. You don't need to go crazy. You should have a little bit of money in the bank.
Yeah.
Certain countries do actually want you to show proof, and I can get into that a bit more with some of my experiences down the road. And have a little idea. You want a loose plan because you don't want to be constrained.
Right.
But you should have a little direction. And so we got in our camper van. We went around Australia for about 4 months. We loved it. I mean, we drove 7,000 kilometers in 5 days to go through the Red Center, which was crazy, but
worth all that?
Oh man, that Red Center, you feel like you're on Mars. It was fantastic, but that country is just as diverse as Canada, as the States, and it was beautiful. And after that experience in Australia, I just hit the road. I took all the money I'd saved. I went to...
Did you work in Australia for a while?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I worked for a Canadian-themed restaurant in Sydney.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I made a mistake, actually.
Wait, what was the name of the restaurant?
It's called Salmon and Bear.
Because I think I went there when I was in... Yeah, because I went to the Canadian-themed restaurant in Sydney.
I think you went to the one at Bondi Beach.
Oh, I did.
Yeah. Because this one just opened. I got real lucky. I was on the ground floor.
I did go to the one in Bondi.
And an honest-to-goodness Canadian, right?
Yeah.
I love that place.
You were hired the moment you stepped into the door. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You're pretty Canadian.
Well, the guy I work with the most, fantastic guy, he was from Austin. So it was kind of funny. You're in a Canadian-themed restaurant. You get a guy from Texas and a guy from Toronto, which, I love being Canadian, but maybe people a little outside of Toronto would have been a better experience for them.
Right, yeah. No.
But
so you worked there for how long?
Basically, the exact limit. Okay. What I was saying when I said I kind of made a mistake is I got scared when I got to Sydney because I was running out of money quick.
Well, yeah, because Sydney's expensive even if you're living in hostels. It's crazy.
I saved 10 grand before I went, and I went through it in about 4 months.
Which is actually, that's required, right?
Yeah.
You have to show that you had 10 grand in the account. At least I remember I had to prove that I had enough.
I think on that visa, it was like $3,500.
Okay. Maybe the student one was 10, I think. But yeah.
I had more because of just the way that I am. And I spent it all because I wanted to do everything that I could.
Right.
But then when we got to Sydney, we were kind of like, oh, wow, we need to figure our situation out.
Right.
So we got our apartment in like a week because we just needed something. And then I needed a job. So I went back to working for a bank. And I ended up in a call center for them selling income cover insurance.
Wow, fun.
And I made it about 2 weeks before I went, this is exactly why I left Toronto.
I'm not going to just do this on the other side of the world.
Yeah. Working in an office that you don't like is the same anywhere in the world. I don't care if there's a beach 10 minutes away.
That's a pro tip.
Yeah.
Q doesn't change much.
And then I found that job, and it opened the door, and I made a lot of money. Because I worked insane amounts, and
because you can in Australia. In Australia, minimum wage is fairly high,
$16 or $17 at that time.
An hour, yeah.
And what was great, pro tip, is Saturdays and Sundays. A lot of workplaces you get time and a half or even double time. So, I was making, I think, $27 an hour.
Working at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Now, tips aren't the same they are in America, just so you understand, but that's still reliable income. That's pretty good reliable income.
Very reliable. And we bunked up 5 of us in an apartment. So I shared a bed with one of my best friends now from Saskatoon.
Okay.
And so, it was interesting. I mean, again, going back to sleeping like this next to someone. But you do what you got to do for money. I slept in the living room for 6 weeks at one point. But if you want it, and I think this goes back to a point that you were saying before. So many people say, oh, I want to travel. And I get asked this all the time, like, oh, how do I do it? Or I wish I could do it.
Right.
And I'd say, well, I always push back. Well, why not? Right. And they'd always say, well, I say, no, sorry, like, tell me. Well, I have commitments, I have a girlfriend, a job, a family, whatever. And I would say to them, honestly, well, so did I. Don't you think it hurt when I left my job or I broke up with that girl? I mean, you have to make choices if you want it, right? Otherwise, maybe just be honest with yourself. You don't really want it.
Right.
The idea seems nicer.
Or some people want it, but they want a room in like a fancy condo on their own. And so you're just going to go there to work to pay for that life. And you're going to not have anything else to do anything else with, right? Like some people want it, but they don't want what comes with it, which is a lot of discomfort.
Yeah.
It comes with giving up cars and car payments, and gives up a little bit of a different kind of freedom, right? You get one kind of freedom, but you're giving up a lot of other kinds of freedoms.
Oh, yeah.
But you can do it if you're willing to and you want to.
I mean, look, you got to get used to eating things like the packs of noodles or
ramen,
cup of soup. Exactly. Right? Figuring out ways to save money, right? Taking that free breakfast at the hostel. I mean, heck, when we found this app that allowed you to find places that you could camp for free, and the amount of times people rolled up on us wondering what the heck we were doing. I mean, it's interesting because basically it was like being homeless.
Yeah.
And there were several places where we realized we were in a homeless community because that was the only place you could get the facilities.
Right.
And that also really changes your perspective, right? And, you come from a nice, like I would say, middle-class background here, and you're getting uncomfortable. I mean, we could probably talk for hours about some of the weird uncomfortabilities that happen when you're traveling. But, that's the thing that I think some people are disingenuous about with traveling. They don't tell you the negative aspects.
Right.
Most people don't want to say they were crying in a room calling their dad.
Right.
Most
and
people...
also with 18 other people.
Contracting malaria.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, because most people's concept of traveling is mom and dad paid for our all-inclusive vacation.
Right,
Bahamas, right? So like, that's most people think of traveling. They think of that, right? They don't think of.
Yeah, no, for sure. What you were saying earlier that I thought was really interesting. Well, I kind of had this idea as listening to you was like that. I think most of the fear that keeps people from that is really just that fog of war.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That like sort of cloudy where you just don't really understand it. Like you actually do know that you need a job and you need a place to stay and you need some food. Like the necessities aren't that hard. It's just that putting it in a different context somehow makes it seem so much more complex.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's really not. It has its characters and charms depending on where you are in the world, for sure. But like the realities of like you can make a lot work.
Oh yeah, and like I said, a lot of it to me was about growing up. Like I'll give you an example that doesn't paint me in the best light, but was a real eye-opening moment for me. And so we were in this apartment, the 5 guys, and I threw something at the garbage can, right, like piece of paper or whatever it was, and I missed. Right? And I just walked away. And then I had this moment of realization, no one is going to pick that up. Right? And then I was like, oh, wow. Oh, my God. I am such a you-know-what.
Yeah.
I've been leaving that for my dad or my mom to pick up all these years, right?
Right.
And I was just like, what a bad habit. What a bad person, right? And it was moments like that you're so spoiled that you don't realize those things. And then I became in charge of the bills in our apartment because working at a bank, somehow I was more qualified to do that.
I choose you, man.
I never set up. It took us 4 minutes to get 4 months to get our internet set up over there.
It took me 3 in Milton, so par for the course.
Oh, man.
Well, I think this is important, though. I think it's important because I think the same people who say, I want to travel, but don't end up ever traveling are the same people who are still living at home when they're 28.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. You can do it in a different place in a different part of the world, but the same barriers that are holding people back from growing up here are the same things that hold them back from growing up in other places. And you could have done that here. Like you could have moved in with 5 guys, done it affordably, learned to pay your own bills and pick up your own trash. You can do that right here. And what we're trying to do on this podcast is actually say you should, right? Like you should do that earlier than later. Yeah. But sometimes it takes opportunities like this, going elsewhere, changing your setting and scene to teach you something that you didn't learn in the setting that you were already stuck in because of the patterns of behavior.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, it's actually the practice of doing some of those things growing up when you have the opportunities right now are the things that actually liberate you to feel comfortable enough to press into unknown territory.
Yeah, that's
right?
good. That's good.
And so being willing to be shaped by our current situation, no matter what it is the thing that sometimes allows us to do more exciting things and to kind of create the world that we want. So many times we just inherit something because it's just the next thing comes to us.
Right.
The reality is you actually have to go after what you want. Right.
Good. That's good. So let's move on.
Yeah.
Australia, 5 guys, yada, 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 all your stuff there. Then what? Where'd you go from there? And how'd you go from there?
No, for sure. So I saved up quite a bit after Australia, and I wanted to strike out on my own, right? So
what do you mean by that?
Well, you know, my cousin and I, it was good and bad for our relationship, and that was growing as well. You know, someone that's like a brother to me that we, on many occasions, almost came to blows, I'm sad to say.
Yeah.
But, you know, like in the end, it made us better. Like, just to finish that story, I mean, fast forward months later, we're sitting in Barcelona at the end of a pier, having a beer, haven't seen each other in months, just going, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. You know?
Right.
And, yeah, like it made us both better people, I would say, and hope to continue, you know? But I wanted to try to do a little for myself and get away from that comfort, which is not like me, or at least wasn't like me. And so I just hit the road and I went through Southeast Asia. I did, well, first I went to New Zealand because Lord of the Rings, right?
Oh, man.
Actually, you know, you'd be surprised what inspires you. I saw a painting in a gallery in Sydney of the Milford Sound, and I thought, I need to go there. And I went to the Milford Sound, and, you know, it's one of the top 5 things I've ever seen in my life. You know, and it was all because of a painting.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, I was not before that an art gallery kind of guy.
Sentimental of you.
Yeah, it was really weird. You know, you find out things about yourself. I mean, I wrote my first poem ever. Not that I'm a poet by any mean. When I was just sitting there and I met this fantastic girl from Finland, and we became friends. And she encouraged me to try, and I did. And I thought it was a joke, and she was like, wow, that's some real feeling.
Right.
So, you know, you got to open yourself up to things, right? I think a lot of people, when they talk about traveling, they're focused on learning other people's cultures and stuff, which is fantastic, and that happens if you're willing to. But also, if you're willing to, you learn a lot about yourself. So I kept going. I went through Cambodia. I went through, Singapore, Bali. I did Thailand. And then I went to Finland to go see my friend again, Estonia. Then I went to the UK to visit one of my best friends at law school there because, you know, still thinking myself up here, I wanted to check out law school. And long and short of it, you know, I just kept traveling. I went around all of like continental Europe. And then eventually, to cut up my story, I ended up back in Canada, and I was like, well, what now?
Right.
At that time, I had met a girl in England, and I was still feeling unsettled. So basically, fast forward, I ended up back in the UK. Another visa. Canadians, I don't know as much about the American situation.
I don't either. But never tried to go to England, so.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they don't want you guys there.
Might not.
They're still a little
bitter.
bitter.
There was this whole war in 1776. I don't know if you heard about it, but
moving on.
Yeah, we're the good son, right?
That's right. That's right.
So you can get a 2-year visa to the UK. It's even less restricted than the one in Australia. You have to go to the consulate, and a bit more hoops to jump through with that one. I remember I had to bring 6 months of bank statements to show I had the right amount of money. There was a small interview, and you do biometrics like fingerprints and photographs. But it's good because when you get there, you have a card that's, if anyone asks why is a Canadian here, you can show them that.
Right.
But that was
basically the barriers were don't have a criminal record, right, and have enough money in your bank account.
Yeah,
do the paperwork and show up to the interview or whatever. Right, those are the barriers, and like most of you who those 3 things apply to, like. It's unlikely they're going to say no to you, right?
Yeah,
like
it's easy. Much easier than you think.
Right.
One thing that I have to say, remembering now that I made a mistake, I didn't actually look at the timeline of when I was leaving and when I would get my passport back. So actually, I was going to miss my flight because I wasn't getting my passport back on time. So I had to run back to the consulate and pay them extra to expedite it.
Get it fast, yeah.
So that wasn't very smart.
Yeah. Well, maybe the 4th barrier is planning in advance well enough, right?
Yeah, and that was after I'd been to like 20-something countries, so you can still make mistakes,
Now,
right?
I want to ask this question about going from country to country, because some people, like, they can't even conceptualize what does it mean to go from country to country. It literally, like, you saved up enough in Australia to fly, you pay for your own flight, you book it, you get on it, you land at the airport, and then what do? You find somewhere to stay?
I can't even tell you the right way about it, because there were some times where I planned it down to like basically the second, and other times where I'm like, someone said that city looks cool. I'm going to go there and we'll figure it out.
But you had a smartphone and presumably internet, right?
Yeah. And, I don't shy away from talking to people.
Right.
And one benefit of English language is a lot of people speak it. And maybe it's my Italian heritage, but the hand gestures don't hurt either.
That's good.
But like England was different because going there for a relationship, going there thinking about a phase of my life, it wasn't so much about traveling. It was establishing a life. And that's a totally different type of traveling. And when you're traveling around Europe, like as if it's a weekend vacation, is also different than when you're trying to find yourself when you're like 22 in Australia.
Right. Yeah. A little different.
It's a bit more about being an adult in those cases. But, like living and working in another country, it really does change your perspective on things, right? And you find out all the weirdest things, like Canadians can vote in British elections because we're citizens of the Commonwealth.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
That's for real?
I'm not kidding. I voted in the general election after Brexit.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I thought, you know what? I'm living there. I'm paying taxes, and I really do follow politics. So why, if I'm
participate?
Yeah. Right.
That is awesome. I had no idea. That's so cool.
Yeah. So interesting little tidbits.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
There's kind of two things. I want to know what you learn about yourself. You're kind of going into it. Some key things you learn about yourself from doing this. And just learn about your own humanity. And then what did you learn about the world? Like, you saw a lot, you did a lot. What are some key things you walked away with about yourself? And what are some key things you walked away with about the world and humanity in general, I guess?
Humanity in general, life is complicated. A thing that hit me back when we were in Haiti is apples and oranges, to put it in the simplest way. When we were sitting around, people from here would say, oh, we're so lucky, we're so fortunate, right? Like, we have so much and they have so little. But I felt like a lot of those people were only engaging on a surface level. People in Haiti have lots, just in a different way. I saw so many happy people with their friends, their families, their communities, things that I find that people here are often lacking. Yeah, we have more money and stuff like that, and I'm obviously very thankful and happy for that. But we can learn things from them, and I think sometimes we can be a little condescending with our perspective. But also at the same time, what was interesting is the amount of misinformation they had about us. Talking with them, some of them just thought we were all rich and never have to work and just kind of roll out of our mansions, right? And it shows how much we need to talk more to each other, I keep saying this, like, everywhere you go, there's good and there's bad people, which I think a lot of people say. But, even the people that maybe we might consider bad, not that I always agree with them or anything, but a lot of times if you pay attention, you notice that people are just trying to do the best for their group, their community, whatever it is. And if we started to realize more of that, we could probably have a better conversation, And one great thing about where I lived in the UK is Canterbury, Kent. There was a lot of universities there. And especially because of the European Union, there's a lot of people coming from all over. And so when you get friends from all sorts of different places, it is just so fascinating to hear what they think about us, Even the stereotypes of Canada, a little too much snow, polar bears, igloos, that kind of thing. But it also really makes you think about things, right? Like, I got to say this, and it's sad to say for Canadians, but I start to realize how arrogant we are. We unfortunately always feel so good talking about Americans.
Busting our chops. It's fair.
But, sometimes it's not fair. That's what I started to realize. And the amount of Americans I met, because I was a tour guide there, maybe I'm leaving something out. And so I spent a lot of time with English language students from around the entire world. I remember being with groups from Saudi Arabia, and to me, a history lover, were astounded that they never heard of the Roman Empire before.
What? Wow.
And it was one of those moments. Who hasn't heard of the Roman Empire was what I thought, right?
Yeah.
And, it just shows how much we end up in our own bubbles, even when we try to branch out. And, the amount of Americans that would just start with an apology about just general non-specific things. And I always found that fascinating, right? And the amount of Canadians that would feel like, they could just talk about how fantastic Canada is. And don't get me wrong, Canada is fantastic. But hey, look, nobody's perfect, right? So it was starting to make me realize, well, why is Canada such a good place, right? And have to actually ask that question. What is good? What is bad? Right? What do I like better about the UK, for example?
Yeah, I find it, one of the things that I find interesting about travel that I think nothing else does is that I remember going to India and we landed. It was dark. It was one of those like no plan kind of, we should have thought this through better kind of moments, And I mean, the writing was unfamiliar. Like you couldn't, like when you go to a romantic language, like if you go to France or something, it's like, oh yeah, that word looks like train. I'm going to go that way. But when you go someplace where you don't know anything, the outlets are different. They drive different. The culture's different. People are different. Personal space is different. Yeah. When everything is different, it forces you to reflect so much on the culture that you're from.
Yeah.
I remember I'm a people person. I like being around people. And I remember being in India, like just walking down the street and being so claustrophobic with people that it made me uncomfortable for the first time ever. You know what I mean? And it was like, that is just a bizarre feeling that you cannot get in any other way than immersing yourself into those cultures. And I really find it interesting that that's almost universal to people who do travel in their formative years for sure, and do it that way where they're trying to experience something new. Going to like sandals is not really, you know what I mean? Like,
wait, what?
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
I'd be down for a sandal.
Me too. Like those are great too.
Yeah,
but
I could do that.
But it's there is so much, and I found that to be a theme of what you were sharing. There's so much self-reflection that happens, and there's so much growth that it's so worth it. It's so worth it if you can find a way to immerse yourself into cultures like that. And you can do that here. Even like there are different ways to do that. Like I found myself, feeling some of those feelings in Los Angeles. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you can find that elsewhere. You don't have to go to Bali, but I mean, it helps.
Yeah.
So
no, that clash might be more evident, right? And there's so many things that you think about. Like even for example, what relationships matter to you?
Yeah.
Right? Like a thing that astounded me when I was gone, because I was gone for years, right? And the amount of people that I thought were my best friends that never messaged me, right? That hurt. That really hurt, right? But then I also started to think, okay, some of them I did reach out to, but some of them I didn't reach out to. And then I thought, oh, wow, here I am thinking I'm hurt, and I wasn't thinking, well, maybe they're hurt, right?
Right.
And also the people that I didn't think that our relationship meant that much, even to them, that were messaging me nonstop. I felt like actually I talked to my family more than ever, right? I called even my aunts and uncles, which, I love them, but usually you forget to talk to them. It just things like that, and, a really big growing moment for me was, I remember being on a boat on a tour one time, because I rowed a boat for our tours. Yeah, I know, weird, but
wait, what?
Boat tour.
Yeah. It was a boat tour. So
I was
a boat captain. Yeah, I had a license and everything. Yeah, I literally would row the boat.
Microphone?
No, just
on your
where you can't understand a single thing the guy's saying.
Literally, it's a 12-person little rowboat, like a fisherman's boat. You go down a river in this beautiful city, Canterbury. You got to go, and it's astounding because even that place, right? Like you can't even fathom it a lot of times from our chronological perspective. That city is a Roman city. It's a Celtic city, right? But so like again, getting back to like the experience I had with some of the Saudi Arabian kids, right? I remember I took a group out from Russia, and because of some of my political studies in university, and I would say also because of hockey.
I was going to say, he's a hockey player. That's what I was going to say.
I often could have a little of an adversarial opinion of Russians, right? And so I get on this boat, and this is probably, 3 years ago or so, and it just wasn't a good tour, right? And I, would like to say a lot of good tours. I felt like they were really rude and mean and just like disrespectful. And I was just thinking in my head, like typical Russians, right? Even though I really hadn't met many Russians. And, so then anyways, fast forward like 2 days later, and I'm walking down the high street, and the lady that was in charge of their group comes right up to me. She goes, "You were so rude." And here I am thinking I'm the nicest guy, right? And I'm like, wait, what do you mean I'm rude? So I got defensive. I said, excuse me. I thought you were extremely rude. And then so, I'm not going to I'll save you the details, but basically we reached this point where we realized we both already decided what we thought about each other before we actually even understood who each other was. So we kind of made nice, I would say. And she said she was coming back soon with another group. And and it was funny because she came back with that group and I tried really, really hard and she did. And we realized how much we have still shared values and things in common and stuff. You can't agree on everything, but that's fine. But and from that moment on, every time I met Russians, I tried very hard to appreciate them, understand them. And I found that my relationships with them got infinitely better. And they started inviting me to come to Russia, which beforehand I thought, no way, never, right? So maybe after COVID, I'll think of like Moscow or St. Petersburg or something.
I'd be down. Let's go. So, Matt, I want to know a few things. The audience, presumably is young adults who, some of them are listening thinking, I don't want to travel. And we look at them and say, you should. It's good. If you can, you should. It's great for you. You don't have to, but it's really great. We've all had great experiences. None of us regret. I don't know if any of us really regret any of the travel we've done.
Not
even
a single
if
moment.
Bad things happen, we learn from it. So travel is always worth it if you can do it. It is a luxury, right? A lot of people around the world can't do it. So we see it as a privilege and a luxury. But since we have it, it's good. And it'll help you get further in life. Like it'll teach you certain things that'll help you be an adult here or anywhere else better if you do that. So we'd say everybody should want to travel. What would you say? Give us like 3 things that you would say to somebody who is saying, I want to travel, but like there's 3 buts. You knew you had those same buts. 3 things, practical, and help them out. Either a principle or an actual pro tip that would help them go from I want to travel, but to I'm going to this
Wisconsin
in 6 months when I'm allowed. Yeah,
sure. Well, first I would say, look, if you're really intimidated, maybe start small, right? Have you ever been to Quebec City?
Ooh, that's good.
Right? One big thing is after all my traveling, the first time I came back, I was back for about 6 months. My cousin and I realized all these people kept saying, well, first, why would you leave Canada? It's fantastic. And second, have you seen the Rockies or Vancouver or something? I'd never seen it, right? And so we hopped in my car because I still had it sitting in the garage. And thank my dad for paying the fees on that one. Thank you, sir. Well, he bailed me out there. Anyway, so we went all across Canada and we met like our friends, like the one from Saskatoon that we lived with. And we had all these fantastic experiences and really got to see our own backyard. So really traveling is many things. Like I started to realize really how different life on the prairies is than from Toronto, right? And also how many people don't like Toronto.
Right.
So start small. Like you can build your confidence. 2, maybe look and see what interests you. One of the best things that I can say that came out of it for me is, I grew up Italian Canadian, but I didn't understand what that meant till I left. And I realized that I'm not very Italian and also in some ways not very Canadian in the classical definitions, right? And so when I go to Italy, I realized that we still have family there. Didn't even know they existed.
Right.
So I was the first person to meet up with them since World War II, basically. Wow. I learned all this family history. I went to even my grandfather's village in rural Puglia. No one spoke English anywhere along that part. But hey, I also learned a lot of people do speak English there. But I mean, that totally changed it. I realized how diverse Italy was, for example. I realized dialect, languages, food, everything, culture. That was just totally eye-opening for me and so personal, right? So bias, go to Italy.
But what you are saying is like, don't just travel because you're traveling, and don't just go to whatever the hot spot is necessarily.
Yeah.
Like if you're not loaded, you can't go anywhere, everywhere, all the time. Pick something that is actually personal or interesting to you.
Yeah.
Because it might be Italy or it might be New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't do both, pick which one is more intimate and personal to you. Is what you're saying? Like
100%,
start there,
right?
Good.
One of the worst things you can do is look at what's trendy on Instagram right now and go there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I've done couch surfing and stuff like that. I've randomly met locals and everything. And those are the best things to do. And I guarantee you, if you find a nice thing on Instagram, you can find 10, 20, 30 other ones like it. Especially in Italy. If you're talking about beautiful seaside villages or whatever, I mean, take your pick.
Right.
Most UNESCO World Heritage sites, I believe, in the world. So, I mean, hey.
You can see old stuff.
Yeah.
And probably for a little bit cheaper than
Yes.
the Instagram shot. Yeah.
And for the love of God, sorry, but, don't just go to the tourist areas.
Yes.
Walk 10 minutes in any direction and you'll find infinitely better food, everything, right? And sorry, carbonara that you eat here is not real carbonara. Right. A lot of Italians don't like pineapple on their pizza. They think it's like against religion. It's just funny. You pick up a lot of different things, and it totally challenges your perceptions. And please don't go to Italy and go to McDonald's.
Yeah,
we had a group of missionary kids come up here from the States, from the Midwest, and we sent them to Toronto for a day. And we said, "There's so much to eat. Just pick something."
Kensington Market, and
find some literally place. Told them. Told them the places to go. We gave them a massive list, all kinds of food. They came home. So what'd you guys eat for lunch? Burger King. Stop. Don't save your money. Don't go anywhere. Right? If you're going to do that, don't go anywhere. Save your money because it's not worth it. But that's good. Yeah. Walk outside of the tourist zone and give you. I think an important part of that is you need to give time to do that. If you're only planning on going to Italy for 3 days, you're not going to do much more than the big stuff, and but give yourself time so you can do it, which is what you did. You gave yourself space and time to actually explore, and that's the experience from that is a million times better. Yeah,
and I think that you develop habits too. You probably know this too. It's I like to eat my way through cultures, and so what's really great is you go through a culture and you're I'm targeting food, so I'm going to go there, and on my way I'm going to see a whole bunch of cool things, and you pick up a lot of the tourist stuff's unavoidable. When we were in Vietnam, it's there's so much in Saigon that's iconic, statues and all this kind of stuff, and the presidential palace was there, the old one and stuff like that, and you just sort of see that on your bike ride,
right?
But it was, for us, it was food. And so and so it's kind of fun. You develop your own way of experiencing these things, and you sort of get what you want, I guess.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah. So number one was start local, which is, I love that tip actually. Yesterday I was driving to a wedding in Simcoe and I had an hour to kill. So I stopped in Port Dover.
Nice.
And I'd never been to Port Dover, but now when people say, oh yeah, Port Dover, I know what it's like on a Saturday with the bikers. I can picture it now.
Yeah.
And it's simple. Didn't take anything much. There's probably so many young people who are sitting at home right now on a Saturday, and you could literally drive anywhere in 7 hours, and there's so much to do and see. So start local. I like that.
Yeah.
Before you go all over the world, and it's almost free to do local. Number two, you said
kind of find something that interests you, right?
Right.
It's easy to just go where everyone else is going, but you might actually get there. I obviously don't know the word for it, but I've been told by many people that apparently in Japanese, they have their own word for basically being disappointed with Paris because, for sure.
That's awesome.
I hope I'm not saying some fake history right now, but it's a thing that's persisted with traveling. And to me, that hurts because personally, I think Paris is fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you expect, I know it's called the City of Lights, but there's going to be some dull moments, right?
Any city.
So, you got to be realistic, right?
Yeah.
And if you're putting all your expectations, you could be disappointed.
Yeah.
If you start here and just leave yourself open, you can pass all those expectations, right?
That's an interesting point that you're making. It's a side point, but these cities you're going to are cities that people live and work in.
Yeah.
I remember going to Amsterdam thinking wow, it's crazy here. It's not a tourist destination. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's primarily a city people work in and trade in and live in.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of all cities all over the world you go and visit. Yeah.
Vegas is my favorite example of that. Because I went to regular Vegas, not strip Vegas, and I was going there, and I was this is gonna be crazy, there's gonna be casinos everywhere, and it's no, this is just a big bank and a Starbucks, and and then I was where's the cool stuff? They're oh, that's the strip. Nobody goes there. Basically, that's a whole other city within.
Do you have a final tip for our young adults before we?
Yeah, my final tip would be it's probably not as expensive or as difficult as you think.
Good.
A little research can take you a long way. There's plenty of applications, websites, everything that you can utilize that can give you cheaper flights, better discounts, deals, and don't be afraid to go in the off season, right? I get it's appealing that, if it's a city that's famous for its beaches, you want to go in the height of summer, But hey, a good example is like when I was in Calabria and it was 25 degrees outside, sunny, and I'm sitting on a beach and no one's there because for the locals it was too cold.
Right.
And I have a beach entirely to myself, right? You got to go off the path because you'll be pleasantly surprised. A place that I would plug in is in southern Italy, Puglia region, or Apulia, some people call it. It's a place where Italians go on vacation. And so, yes, it's a little scary because maybe English isn't as common to come across there. But it's a lot easier when you face a person, you listen to a person, you read their body, everything like that. You can communicate. I mean, to go back to your point about India with some of the languages, Cambodia, it was Khmer or French, and so at least some of the French I could read. But, a lot of it, we can't use, verbal communication. You'll figure it out. Yeah. And it is so rewarding to then realize I went outside my comfort zone and I did that. And now I have those experiences, right? Whereas God bless the States, but I mean, in a lot of ways, that's an easy trip, right? Yeah. Who hasn't been across the border or something to go shopping in Buffalo or whatever, right?
Target. Yeah. Tourist, that's a place you got to go.
I think what you're saying is really important, and we'll land on that and we'll finish up here.
Sure.
You're I guess what I'm getting from you is once you've done it, you've overcome it, you have this confidence and this empowerment to take on more, just even in your own life around you, right?
Yes.
You have this confidence and the freedom to pack up and go to the UK and live there for 2 years after doing all that because you understand how it works and you have this freedom and you kind of see through the veil, right? And you're okay, no, this is doable. But that also translates back to this life now. You're probably not going to do a job you're not that interested in for that long while you're here, or you'll have a different perspective of it now, and you'll feel a confidence and a freedom and empowerment to take certain risks here in this life in order to get ahead in a certain area or take a step that you wouldn't normally take or move in with a type of person you wouldn't normally move in with because you've experienced this. And so I think that's a really, really important thing of traveling.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful.
If I could add one thing to that, what I would say is part of growing up too is about realizing that sometimes life isn't all fun. Traveling isn't all fun. Work isn't all fun. And, if I could go back with the bank, I would still leave and go travel, but I would have handled a lot of things differently. Mm-hmm. I was young, I was arrogant, I was headstrong, and I'm probably still a lot of those things. But, going to the new countries is terrifying, even after you've done it countless times. And like I was saying to you before, when I took a break from traveling for a while, at least traveling solo, I should say, when I went back and I did my first trip solo, I planned 6 weeks. And I forgot how terrifying it was. And for the first couple of days, I was in Munich. And I remember I just put my headphones in and I kind of went around and saw things and just stayed in my own world. And then I thought, whoa, I used to join groups and parties and go places and do things. Why am I just sitting here and get a meal and go into my cubby and sleep? And then, that's not what I want to do. And then I started just making an effort again and going out. And it reaffirmed to me that, hey, it can be a constant battle to keep up those things, but you're capable of much more than you know. Yeah. You just got to stay at it.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. You got any last?
I do have one quick thing from the old guy. Okay. So there is a shelf life for the kind of freedom that you have in your youth, right? And do it now because there will come a time when you can't, right? And that might be 70 years, it might be. But, I so value the time that I spent experiencing new cultures and traveling, before I was married, before I had kids, all that kind of stuff. And it shapes you as a person very foundationally. And so for you, I guess I want there to be some sort of sense of urgency for young people to experience those things while freedom is still right at their fingertips. You know what I mean? There's the responsibilities come and they attach themselves to you, and they're harder and harder to shake, and they're harder and harder to make happen.
And and they're rewarding in other ways, right? They're definitely rewarding in other ways. But in order to be you're a better dad and husband now because you did that.
100%.
Because you had that. And that's a season that I don't look back and I don't have massive regrets, right? I don't look back and go like, oh, I should have done more. I should have done this. I should have done that. Like, you're content. You love the life you have, and it's in front of you, and God's got stuff to do with you here and now. Yeah. And for me, it's not pack up and move to Australia and travel. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm better now because of that. And I think I would echo what you're saying. Like, and we as people who are in that season would say, if you're not, like, pursue it now. Yeah. And consider it now.
Skip the new Xbox, skip the new PlayStation, and go somewhere cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Do it. It's good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Yeah. Thank you again, Erik, for joining us on the Young Man's Guide to Life podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something from it. And we hope this inspires you to travel, to take a risk, take a leap, take a jump. If you want any practical help or just like a real conversation with one of us, just send us an email. We'll put our email in the show notes, and we would love to dialogue with you further and help you and empower you to actually take those risks. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Young Man's Guide to Life podcast.
Nice.